When the diamond-encrusted hand connected with my cheek in front of 300 wedding guests, I thought my world was ending. But when my billionaire husband stood up and quietly said, "Touch my wife again, and you'll lose everything," the entire ballroom went silent. What happened next changed not just my life, but showed everyone the true power of unconditional love. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Emma, and 6 months ago, I was working double shifts at a downtown diner, barely making ends meet. I lived in a studio apartment with paper-thin walls, drove a car that broke down more often than it started, and my biggest luxury was the occasional coffee from the shop next door. I never imagined that serving pancakes and coffee would lead me to the love of my life, but sometimes destiny finds you in the most unexpected places. Marcus Wellington walked into Lou's diner on a rainy Tuesday morning, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit. Most of our customers were construction workers, taxi drivers, and office clerks grabbing quick breakfast before work. But here was this man who clearly belonged in five-star restaurants, ordering scrambled eggs and toast like it was the most natural thing in the world. What struck me wasn't his obvious wealth, but how he treated everyone around him. He said please and thank you to every staff member, left generous tips, and never once acted like he was better than anyone else. Marcus became a regular, always sitting in booth 7, always ordering the same thing, and always bringing a genuine smile that could light up the entire diner. We started talking during slow periods, and I discovered he was nothing like the wealthy men I'd seen in movies. He asked about my dreams, listened when I talked about wanting to finish college someday, and shared stories about his work that made me laugh until my sides hurt. There was something refreshing about his humility, his kindness, and the way he made me feel like the most important person in the room, even when I was wearing a grease-stained apron and had flour in my hair. 3 months into our friendship, Marcus finally asked me out on a real date. I was terrified because I knew we came from different worlds, but the way he looked at me made me feel brave. Our first date wasn't at some fancy restaurant where I'd feel out of place. Instead, he took me to a street fair, where we shared funnel cake, rode the Ferris wheel, and talked for hours while sitting on a park bench. That night, I realized I was falling in love with a man who chose to see beauty in simple moments, who valued genuine connection over expensive experiences, and who made me believe I was worthy of something extraordinary. Our relationship blossomed over the next few months, filled with quiet dinners at my tiny apartment, long walks through the city, and conversations that lasted until sunrise. Marcus never made me feel ashamed of my modest lifestyle, and I never felt pressure to be anything other than myself. We were building something real, something beautiful, based on mutual respect and genuine affection. When he proposed to me in the same diner where we met, getting down on one knee right there in booth 7, while our regular customers cheered, I knew I'd found my forever person. The wedding planning process opened my eyes to just how wealthy Marcus really was. The Wellington family name carried weight in our city's social circles that I'd never fully understood. Marcus came from old money, the kind of generational wealth that built museums and funded scholarships. His business empire stretched across multiple industries, and his influence reached into every corner of high society. But despite all this, Marcus insisted we keep our wedding simple and focused on what mattered most, our love for each other and the commitment we were making. The ceremony was intimate, held in a small chapel with just our closest friends and family. Marcus looked absolutely radiant in his tailored tuxedo, and I felt like a princess in the vintage dress I'd found at a consignment shop. The reception was elegant but understated, exactly what we both wanted. For those few hours, surrounded by people who truly cared about us, I forgot all about the differences in our backgrounds. I was just Emma, marrying the man of my dreams, ready to start our new life together as husband and wife. Our honeymoon was a dream come true. 2 weeks in a cozy cabin by a lake, where we could just be ourselves without any outside pressures. Marcus showed me a world I'd never experienced, not through expensive gifts or lavish experiences, but through his unwavering devotion and the way he made every moment feel magical. We talked about our future, our dreams of traveling together, maybe starting a family someday, and building a life based on love rather than material possessions. Those 2 weeks were perfect, and I truly believed we could handle anything life threw at us. But reality came crashing back when we returned home and started navigating Marcus's social obligations. There were charity galas to attend, business dinners to endure, and family gatherings where I felt like an outsider looking in. Marcus's world was filled with people who measured worth by bank accounts and family connections, and I quickly learned that not everyone was happy about his choice of bride. The whispers followed us everywhere we went, comments about how Marcus had married beneath his station, speculation about what I must have done to trap such an eligible bachelor. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The first real test of our marriage came at Marcus's business partner's daughter's wedding. An extravagant affair that showcased everything I still felt uncomfortable about in high society. The venue was a historic mansion, with manicured gardens, crystal chandeliers, and enough flowers to fill a florist shop. Every guest was dressed in designer clothing that cost more than I used to make in 6 months, and the conversations revolved around topics I knew nothing about. Vacation homes in Europe, exclusive country clubs, and investment portfolios that generated more money than most people could spend in a lifetime. I wore a beautiful dress Marcus had bought me. Something elegant and appropriate for the occasion, but I still felt like I was wearing a costume. The other wives and girlfriends had a certain polish that came from years of attending these events, an ease with the social protocols that I was still learning. They spoke a language of subtle insults disguised as compliments, competitive small talk about their latest purchases, and casual name-dropping that was designed to establish pecking orders. I tried my best to fit in, smiling politely and making appropriate responses, but inside I felt like I was drowning in a world that seemed determined to remind me I didn't belong. The bride's party was led by her maid of honor, Vivian Blackwood, a woman whose family wealth rivaled Marcus's, but whose character was entirely different. Vivian was beautiful in that polished, untouchable way that came from a lifetime of privilege, but there was something cold about her perfection. She'd known Marcus for years, had moved in the same social circles since childhood, and made no secret of the fact that she disapproved of his marriage to me. From the moment we arrived, I could feel her watching me, evaluating every word I spoke, every gesture I made, looking for proof that I was the fraud she believed me to be. The wedding ceremony was spectacular, held in the mansion's garden with hundreds of white roses and a string quartet providing the soundtrack. I sat beside Marcus, holding his hand and trying to focus on the beauty of the moment rather than the uncomfortable feeling that I was being judged by everyone around me. Marcus squeezed my hand reassuringly whenever he noticed my discomfort, whispering little jokes in my ear to make me smile, reminding me without words that we were a team facing this world together. His presence gave me strength, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building toward a confrontation I wasn't prepared for. The reception moved indoors to a ballroom that looked like something from a fairy tale, complete with a live orchestra, elaborate floral arrangements, and enough champagne to float a small boat. Marcus and I found our assigned seats at a table with other couples from his business circle, people who were polite enough but clearly viewed me as a curiosity. The conversations flowed around topics I couldn't contribute to meaningfully, and I found myself listening more than speaking, trying to learn the unspoken rules of this social game I'd never been taught to play. As the evening progressed, I excused myself to visit the restroom, needing a few minutes away from the constant scrutiny and performative socializing. The ladies' room in this mansion was larger than my old studio apartment, complete with a sitting area, fresh flowers, and an attendant who offered hand towels and breath mints. I was touching up my lipstick when Vivian and 2 of her friends entered, their voices carrying clearly in the marble space as they continued a conversation that made my blood run cold. "I still can't believe Marcus actually married her," Vivian was saying, her voice dripping with disdain. "I mean, what could he possibly see in a diner waitress? It's embarrassing for the entire family." One of her friends laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Maybe he's having some kind of midlife crisis. You know how men get when they want to feel like they're rescuing someone. She's probably just a phase he needs to get out of his system." The third woman joined in with cruel enthusiasm. "Did you see that dress she's wearing? Marcus obviously bought it for her because there's no way she could afford anything appropriate on her own. She looks like she's playing dress-up in her mother's closet. It's pathetic, really. She has no idea how out of place she is here." I stood frozen behind the stall door, my heart pounding as these women dissected my marriage, my character, and my worth, as if I were nothing more than an interesting topic of conversation. Vivian's voice took on a more serious tone. Someone needs to make Marcus see what he's done to himself. He's throwing away his reputation, his social standing, everything his family built. For what? A pretty face and some fantasy about true love? It's ridiculous. She's going to drag him down to her level, and we can't let that happen. Marcus deserves better than some gold-digging nobody who got lucky. I waited until they left before emerging from the stall, my hands shaking as I tried to compose myself. Their words cut deep because they echoed my own worst fears about my marriage to Marcus. Was I really holding him back? Did I truly belong in his world, or was I just fooling myself? The face staring back at me in the ornate mirror looked pale and uncertain, and for a moment I wondered if they might be right about everything they'd said, but then I remembered the way Marcus looked at me when he proposed, the genuine love in his eyes when we exchanged vows, the countless conversations where he told me I made him a better man. This wasn't about money or social status or fitting into some predetermined mold. This was about two people who chose to build a life together based on love, respect, and shared values. I straightened my shoulders, reapplied my lipstick with a steady hand, and prepared to return to the reception with my head held high. When I rejoined Marcus at our table, he immediately noticed something was wrong. His eyes searched my face with concern, and he leaned close to whisper, "Are you all right, sweetheart? You look upset." I considered telling him about what I'd overheard, but this wasn't the time or place for that conversation. Instead, I squeezed his hand and managed to smile. "I'm fine, just tired. It's been a long evening." The trouble started during the bouquet toss, a tradition that should have been light-hearted fun but became something much more sinister. All the unmarried women gathered on the dance floor while the bride prepared to throw her elaborate bouquet of white orchids. I hung back, not particularly interested in participating, but Marcus encouraged me to join in, laughing and saying it would be fun to watch. The bouquet sailed through the air in a perfect arc, and by pure chance it landed directly in my hands. The reaction was immediate and telling. While most of the women clapped politely, I caught several eye rolls and heard a few muttered comments about how appropriate it was that the newest bride caught the bouquet. But Vivian's reaction was entirely different. Her face contorted with rage, and she pushed through the crowd toward me with purpose and malice in every step. "How convenient," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, her voice cutting through the music and conversation like a blade. "The little waitress catches the bouquet. I suppose you think that means you're going to have another fairy tale moment, don't you?" Her words were designed to humiliate me, to remind everyone within earshot of my humble background and suggest I was nothing more than a social climber who'd gotten lucky. I tried to diffuse the situation with grace, holding out the bouquet toward her. "Would you like to have it, Vivian? I'm sure it would mean more to someone who's actually single." But my attempt at diplomacy only seemed to enrage her further. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous, and I realized too late that she was beyond reasoning with. "Don't you dare patronize me," she hissed, stepping closer until we were face to face. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Tricking Marcus into marriage. Playing the innocent little poor girl who just wants to be loved. But I see right through you, and I'm going to make sure everyone else does too." The conversations around us had stopped, and I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes watching our confrontation unfold. That's when it happened, faster than I could react or defend myself. Vivian's manicured hand came up in a vicious arc, connecting with my cheek with a sound that echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom like a gunshot. The impact was shocking, not just physically but emotionally, the public humiliation burning worse than the sting of her palm against my face. For a moment, the entire room held its breath, 300 wedding guests witnessing what felt like the most shameful moment of my life. The sound of that slap echoed through the ballroom like thunder, and in that frozen moment I felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes burning into me. My cheek throbbed with pain, but the humiliation cut deeper than any physical blow ever could. Vivian stood there with her hands still raised, her face twisted with satisfaction, clearly expecting me to crumble under the public shame she'd just inflicted. The wedding guests stood motionless, their champagne glasses suspended halfway to their lips, waiting to see how this unprecedented drama would unfold. But then Marcus rose from his chair, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I had never seen my husband look the way he did in that moment, his usual warmth replaced by something cold and dangerous. His movements were deliberate and controlled as he walked toward us, each step echoing in the absolute silence that had fallen over the ballroom. When he reached us, he didn't rush to comfort me or check if I was hurt. Instead, he positioned himself between Vivian and me, his presence suddenly filling the space like a storm cloud gathering strength. "Vivian," he said, and his voice carried a quiet authority that made everyone in the room lean forward to hear. "I want you to understand something very clearly. You just made the biggest mistake of your life." There was no anger in his tone, no raised voice or dramatic gestures. Just a calm certainty that was somehow more terrifying than any explosion of rage could have been. The way he spoke reminded everyone present exactly who Marcus Wellington was. Not just a wealthy man, but someone whose word could reshape entire industries and whose displeasure could end careers. Vivian's confidence began to waver as the reality of what she'd done started to sink in. She'd been so consumed with her jealousy and need to humiliate me that she'd forgotten the most important rule of high society. Never publicly attack someone under the protection of someone more powerful than yourself. Her face went pale as she realized she'd just declared war on one of the most influential families in the city, and she'd done it in front of witnesses who would remember this moment for years to come. "Marcus, I was just trying to make her see that she doesn't belong here," Vivian stammered, but her voice had lost its earlier venom. "Someone needs to tell you the truth about what people are saying behind your back. She's making you look foolish, and as your friend, I thought you should know." But Marcus wasn't interested in her excuses or her attempts to justify what she'd done. His focus was entirely on making sure she understood the consequences of her actions. "As my friend?" Marcus repeated, and there was something almost amused in his tone. "Vivian, friends don't assault my wife at wedding receptions. Friends don't humiliate the woman I love in front of an audience. And friends certainly don't think they have the right to decide who belongs in my life and who doesn't." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "What you've done tonight has shown everyone here exactly who you really are, and I want to thank you for that clarity." The crowd watched in fascination as one of their own was systematically dismantled by someone who wielded real power in their world. This wasn't just a personal confrontation anymore. It was a lesson in social hierarchy and the consequences of overstepping boundaries. Marcus continued speaking, his voice never rising but somehow filling every corner of the vast ballroom. "You seem to think that wealth gives you the right to treat others with cruelty and contempt, but let me explain something about real power, Vivian. It's not about tearing others down to make yourself feel important. It's about lifting up the people you love and protecting them from small-minded individuals who mistake meanness for strength." I stood there, watching my husband defend not just me, but the values we'd built our marriage on. And I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about one woman's jealousy or one moment of public humiliation. This was about standing up for what was right, about refusing to let bullies dictate how we lived our lives, about choosing love and kindness over status and cruelty. Marcus wasn't just protecting me. He was making a statement about what kind of people we were going to be in this world. Vivian tried one more desperate attempt to salvage her position. "You can't seriously be choosing her over everyone who actually cares about you," she said, gesturing toward the crowd of wedding guests. "Look around, Marcus. These are your people, your real friends. We're trying to save you from making a terrible mistake." But her words only seemed to strengthen Marcus's resolve, and when he smiled, it was the kind of expression that made smart people very nervous. "You want me to look around?" Marcus said, turning to address the entire ballroom. "Let me tell you what I see. I see people who measure worth by bank accounts instead of character. I see individuals who think cruelty is acceptable as long as it's dressed in expensive clothing and delivered with proper grammar. And I see someone who has shown me more about true friendship and loyalty in 6 months than most of you have shown in 20 years. His words carried to every corner of the room, and I watched faces change as people realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. "My wife Emma represents everything I value in this world," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "She works hard, treats everyone with respect, and chooses kindness over convenience every single day. She didn't marry me for my money or my connections or my social status. She married me because she saw something worth loving in the men behind all the external trappings. And if that threatens you, if that makes you uncomfortable, Then that says everything about your character and nothing about hers. The silence in the ballroom was deafening, but I could see the impact of Marcus's words rippling through the crowd. Some guests looked ashamed, others impressed, and a few seemed to be re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about power, class, and what it meant to be truly wealthy. Marcus had just used his influence not to maintain the status quo, but to challenge it, and everyone present knew they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned back to Vivian, who was now visibly trembling with rage and fear. "You asked me to choose between Emma and the people who actually care about me," he said. "Well, here's my choice. Emma stays by my side because she's earned that place through love, loyalty, and genuine partnership. As for you and anyone else who thinks they can treat my wife with disrespect, you're about to learn what it means to cross the Wellington family." The threat hung in the air like a sword about to fall. Everyone in that room understood the implications of Marcus's words. This wasn't just social ostracism they were looking at. This was economic warfare. The Wellington family's business interests touched almost every major industry in the city. Their charitable foundation provided funding for dozens of cultural institutions. Their social influence could open doors or close them permanently. And Marcus had just declared that anyone who stood against his wife would face the full weight of that power. Vivian's father, who had been watching the confrontation unfold from across the room, pushed through the crowd toward us. James Blackwood was a proud man who had built his own fortune through smart investments and strategic partnerships. But he was also smart enough to recognize when his daughter had created a problem that threatened their entire family's position. His face was grim as he approached, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone used to command. "Marcus, I want to apologize for my daughter's behavior," he said formally. "What she did was inexcusable, and I take full responsibility for her actions." He turned to me with genuine regret in his eyes. "Mrs. Wellington, I am deeply sorry for the pain and embarrassment Vivian has caused you. There is no excuse for what happened here tonight, and I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive an old man whose daughter has forgotten the values she was raised with." The apology was gracious and heartfelt, but Marcus's expression remained unchanged. "James, I appreciate your words, and I respect the fact that you're trying to make this right," he said. "But some actions have consequences that go beyond apologies. Your daughter didn't just insult my wife. She made a public spectacle of herself and embarrassed everyone associated with her. That kind of behavior reflects on your entire family, and it's going to have lasting repercussions." I watched as the reality of the situation settled over both Vivian and her father. This wasn't just about one slap or one moment of poor judgment. This was about reputation, social standing, and business relationships that had taken decades to build. In their world, public humiliation of this magnitude could destroy careers, end partnerships, and close doors that might never open again. And Marcus held the power to ensure that every door in the city remained firmly shut. But as I stood there watching this drama unfold, I realized something important about the man I'd married. Marcus wasn't wielding his power out of revenge or a desire to destroy others. He was using it to protect what mattered most to him and to send a clear message about the values he would and wouldn't tolerate in his life. This wasn't about punishing Vivian for sport. It was about creating boundaries and ensuring that no one would ever feel comfortable treating his family with such disrespect again. The bride and groom, who had been watching from the head table in horror as their reception turned into a battleground, finally approached our group. The bride looked mortified that her special day had been overshadowed by such ugliness, while the groom seemed torn between his loyalty to old friends and his desire to maintain his relationship with one of the city's most powerful families. They whispered urgently with Vivian's father, clearly trying to find some way to salvage the situation before it spiraled completely out of control. Marcus noticed their distress, and his expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry your celebration was interrupted by this unpleasantness," he said to the couple. "Emma and I will leave quietly, so you can get back to enjoying your special day. But I want everyone here to understand that what happened tonight will not be forgotten or forgiven easily. Actions have consequences, and those consequences extend far beyond this ballroom." As we prepared to leave, something beautiful happened. Several wedding guests approached us, not to gossip or gawk, but to express their support and admiration. An elderly woman whose family had known Marcus since childhood took my hands in hers and said, "My dear, What that girl did was despicable, but the way your husband defended you was magnificent. You're a lucky woman to have found a man with such character." Others nodded in agreement, and I realized that not everyone in this world valued cruelty over kindness. A younger couple approached us with warm smiles. "We wanted to tell you how much we admire what you both stand for," the woman said. "It's refreshing to see someone use their influence to defend what's right instead of just protecting their own interests. You've given us hope that things can change in our social circles." Their words meant more to me than they could possibly know, because they suggested that Marcus and I weren't alone in wanting something better from the world we moved in. As we walked toward the exit, I caught sight of Vivian one last time. She was surrounded by her friends and family, all of them talking urgently and trying to figure out how to minimize the damage she'd caused. But there was something different about her posture now, a defeated quality that suggested she finally understood the magnitude of her mistake. She'd let jealousy and entitlement drive her to a moment of violence that would define her reputation for years to come, and no amount of money or social connections could erase what everyone had witnessed. Outside, in the cool night air, Marcus and I stood together on the mansion steps, the sounds of the continued reception drifting through the windows behind us. The valet brought our car, and as we settled into the quiet luxury of the interior, I finally felt safe enough to process everything that had happened. My cheek still stung from Vivian's slap, but the pain was nothing compared to the overwhelming gratitude I felt for having a husband who would stand up for me so completely and so publicly. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, gently touching my face where Vivian had struck me. "I should have seen this coming and protected you from her jealousy. I'm so sorry you had to go through that humiliation." But I shook my head, taking his hands in mine and looking directly into his eyes. "Marcus, what you did in there wasn't just about protecting me. You stood up for everyone who's ever been made to feel less than because of where they come from or how much money they have. You used your power to defend what's right, and that's the man I fell in love with." The drive home was quiet, both of us processing the evening's events and what they meant for our future. I knew that our lives had changed in that ballroom, that we'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Marcus had made it clear that he would use every resource at his disposal to protect our marriage and the values we stood for, and that meant we'd probably face retaliation from people who felt threatened by our stance. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because I'd seen exactly what kind of man my husband was when tested. When we arrived home, Marcus poured us each a glass of wine, and we sat together on our couch, still dressed in our formal attire but finally able to speak freely about everything that had transpired. "Do you regret marrying me?" I asked him, voicing the fear that had been building since I'd overheard those women in the restroom. "Has loving me made your life more complicated than it needs to be?" Marcus set down his wine and turned to face me fully, his expression serious but warm. "Emma, marrying you was the best decision I've ever made," he said without hesitation. "Yes, it's made my life more complicated, but in all the right ways. You've challenged me to be better, to use my privilege for good instead of just maintaining my comfort. You've shown me what real love looks like, and you've taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the relationships we build and the positive impact we have on others." That night, as we held each other close, I realized that what had started as one of the worst evenings of my life had actually become one of the most important. We'd been tested in the most public way possible, and we'd emerged stronger than ever. Marcus had shown me that love isn't just about the good times and romantic gestures. It's about standing together when the world tries to tear you apart, about defending each other's dignity even when it costs you something, about choosing partnership over popularity every single time. The weeks that followed proved just how serious Marcus had been about the consequences he'd promised. Vivian found herself uninvited from charity boards, excluded from social events, and facing difficulties in her family's business dealings. It wasn't cruel revenge. It was simply the natural result of her actions in a world where reputation meant everything. Meanwhile, Marcus and I grew closer, our marriage strengthened by the knowledge that we could face anything together and emerge victorious. Looking back now, I can see that night at the wedding was a turning point, not just for us, but for everyone who witnessed it. We'd proven that love could triumph over prejudice, that character mattered more than class, and that true power came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. The slap that was meant to destroy me had instead revealed the unshakable strength of the life Marcus and I had built together, and that was a victory worth celebrating. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.